honored and thrilled to have Dr. Dave Williams presenting today. And I'm going to read for you a little of his bio. I'm sure this is a very condensed version, but I'll just let you know a bit about Dr. Williams. Canadian astronaut and physician Dr. Dave Williams is the president and CEO of South Lake Regional Health Centre and assistant professor of surgery at the University of Toronto. Dr. Williams joined the Canadian Space Agency in 1992 and made 2 flights on the Space Shuttle in 1998 and 2007. He logged more than 687 hours in space during his career, with a record-setting 17 hours and 47 minutes, performing spacewalks, including installation work at the International Space Station. Having also lived and worked in the world's only underwater ocean laboratory, he became Canada's first dual astronaut and aquanaut in 2001. In addition to his role as astronaut, Dr. Williams held the position of Director of the Space and Life Sciences Directorate at the JSC in Houston, Texas, and a concurrent appointment as the Deputy Associate Administrator for Cruise Health and Safety, Office of Space Flight, NASA HQ, Washington, D.C. In these roles, Dr. Williams was responsible for overseeing research activities, particularly on safety and quality in relation to space exploration. It is a great honor to have Dr. Williams with us today. Please join me in welcoming him as he comes to speak to us from his experience and passion. And also, I want to let you know that immediately following this session, Dr. Williams has generously offered to sign books, which you can purchase at the Steo bookstore right on the corner of the exhibit. And there's a table set up in front of the Steo bookstore with a chair, and that's where you'll find him, where he can sign, autograph his book. So let's welcome Dr. Williams.
Thanks very much. I'm actually going to step down from the podium and wander around, I think. But before we start, I'd like to thank and welcome to the group Laura Donna, my co-author, and Bridget from Anik Press. We're really, really thrilled to be here today. And we wanted to have a chance to share with all of you what's in our book that's just come out. This is the first of 4 books that we're writing. And the goal in writing these books is to capture the imagination of kids about what it's like actually being in space, and use that as a way in which we can focus on STEM. And you know, there's absolutely no question science is cool, as we all know. Do you guys think science is cool? There you go. You know, you guys are all science teachers, a little more excitement here. Science is great. So anyway, I wanted to share with you a story that starts actually many, many years ago. And that was when I was about 7 years of age. And this is 1961. Alan Shepard had just lifted off to go into space. And I was a kid that was marked by one predominant trait, and that was curiosity. And curiosity is so critically important. And that's one of the things that, you know, as teachers, we can all work with kids to be able to expand their innate desire to learn about things. So interestingly, when I was a kid, you know, of course, it was all about the chemistry set, and can you actually mix these things up in a manner that does something really gross, right? Like creates the smell that your mother or father will come downstairs and say, what the heck are you doing down here? Or even better, the little controlled explosion and things. It was all really cool, but it was a journey of curiosity and a journey of discovery. I am now 62 years of age, which, by the way, trust me, I'm a doctor, so just divide by 2 and it's all good. So really, I'm 31 anyway. So it's all, you know, it's a cool kind of situation. But I still remember my grade 6 teacher, Mr. Gord. And Mr. Gord teaching us in a manner that basically built on our inherent curiosity. He challenged our grade 4 class to try and understand Archimedes' principle. And all about buoyancy and sticking boats in bathtubs and looking at displaced water and weighing things. And for 6 months, I tried as a kid to understand this. And I think what was remarkable about Mr. Gore was, despite a fairly structured curriculum, he was able to create an activity for us that built on our inherent curiosity. So kids are curious, and that's one of the things that's really exciting. You would think of me potentially as an astronaut. You might even think of me as an aquanaut. You might think of me as a physician or a neuroscientist. I'm actually none of the above. That was a multiple choice question. Did anyone go for none of the above? So anyway, I'm none of the above. What am I? I'm an exploration scientist. I'm a scientist that fundamentally is really excited and passionate about how the human body lives and works in space and underwater and on the top of Mount Everest and in the Antarctic or the Arctic or any other extreme harsh environment. And that journey of exploration is a relentless quest to seek knowledge. And that, I think, is really, really exciting. So why am I spending so much time on this? Because that's how this book started. I was giving a talk at an elementary school quite a while ago, in fact. But elementary school kids, they're really, really cool, right? You got the little ones, and when we give talks, generally the school brings all the kids into the auditorium, or typically the gym, at any given time. So you get the little ones in the front, and then you get the big ones in the back. And the big challenge when you're talking to kids of that age group is you got to keep the little ones excited for an hour, because of course you're talking for an hour to the kids in the back. So this is a really cool thing. So anyway, I give my talk, and at the end of the talk, the hands go up. Do you have any questions? Oh, yeah, I got a question. This little guy stands up, and he's probably 7 or 8 years old. I don't know, he's relatively short. And I said, so what's your question? And he said, I want to know, when you're in space, when you swallow, without gravity, will the food actually go to your stomach? And I'm thinking to myself, this is like brilliant, right? I mean, doctors were asking this question at NASA in the 1960s, and here we got this little kid this big asking this amazing question. But then, true to curiosity, before I can even answer, he says, but I did an experiment. Rick, what did you do? So he says, I wanted to see whether or not when you swallow food, it will actually go to your stomach if you're upside down. So I went to the park, and I went to the monkey bar. Don't try this at home. Okay, a waiver, everybody has to sign. Don't try this at home. But anyway, so he goes to the park, and he gets upside down in the monkey bars, and he's hanging upside down. And he said, and I wanted to see whether or not when I swallowed, it would go to my stomach, or if I would, in quote, pork it out my nose. So this is brilliant, right? So I'm sitting there going, okay, so what happened? And he says, well, it went to my stomach. And I said, there you go. You see, in space, in the absence of gravity, you can swallow and food will actually go to your stomach. But that was really the stimulus for writing the book, because we recognize that when humans go to space, all these changes that take place in our body are really cool, and kids are interested in it. And through that inherent curiosity, it gives us an opportunity to talk about science. So that's where Laura and I, probably a few years ago now, got together, and we were talking about how can we write this as a book. And very fortunately, we were able to cross paths with Annie Kress to do this. So interestingly enough, when you're in space on board the International Space Station, we refer to this as a microgravity environment. But in fact, the gravity there is only about 10% less than what it is, on the surface of Earth. So what's the deal with this situation where we're floating around and all this? Well, it turns out the International Space Station is in free fall towards the surface of the Earth. So imagine if you're in this really infinitely high building. And this is really cool because you get a really nice view from an infinitely high building. And you go into the elevator, and you wait because it comes all the way up to infinity. You get into the elevator and you push basement. And the elevator starts to go to the basement, but you know what? It's not your day. The cable breaks. And the elevator starts to fall. Well, you're going to be inside the elevator falling at the same speed the elevator's falling at, and you will experience the joys of microgravity because you're falling towards the surface of the Earth at the same rate. So basically, you'll be floating around inside the elevator, and everything is great until you get to the basement, right? And then it's kind of splat, not very good. But in space, we're orbiting the Earth, and we're traveling 25 times the speed of sound. And basically, the reason why we have to travel 25 times the speed of sound is that's the velocity required to keep us in that orbit without the orbit decaying, because we're still under the influence of the force of gravity. And we will have to boost the space shuttle up to its altitude again using our rockets, the OMS engines on it, or the RCS jets. And the same is true of the space station. So with the space station, it's in free fall, but because we're inside it, just like the elevator, we're kind of floating around and things. And then when we dock a Soyuz spacecraft or the space shuttle to the space station, we just reboost it up to maintain its orbital altitude. But you know what's really a challenge, and you guys will resonate with, you try and explain all this for young readers in one paragraph. And boy, oh boy, it's a challenge, right? This little simple explanation was like 10 pages, and Lord on says to me, Dave, it's not going to work. It's got to be one paragraph. Oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? Fortunately, we have talented people that helped us out. Lord on is great and helping me out. The editors and we're also great as well. But the space station enables us to live and work in this really unique environment. Personally, I believe the human species is a spacefaring species. And you know, I was 7 years old when I dreamt of becoming an astronaut. And of course, you're never sure, should you share your dreams with others, right? So I did share my dreams. And I was told you can't be an astronaut. The answer was, why? Because you're Canadian. So what does being Canadian have to do with being an astronaut? Well, back in the 1960s, the only countries that were flying space were the United States and Russia, right? Canada is the third country in the world to have satellites, but we didn't have astronauts. And I think a very important element of kids growing up is not only to learn about curiosity, but to learn about resilience and believing in your dreams. And, you know, who knows how things work out. So I actually said, oh, well, if I can't be an astronaut, I was a little miffed about that, right? Because I wanted to go to space. I thought it was really cool. Anyway, so I thought if I can't be an astronaut, I want to be an aquanaut and live and work underwater like Joe McGinnis, Canada's diving doctor, or Jacques Cousteau and things. And you know, Sunday night bath night, remember those Sunday night bath? So I used to go into the bath with my flippers and my mask, you know, 6 inches of water, I'm exploring the tub, it was very cool. And things, and the ultimate irony is I learned to scuba dive when I was 12 years of age, but I actually flew in space before I became an aquanaut, lived and worked underwater. So I'll hold that thought because that's probably going to be another book or something, who knows. But being in space is really, really cool. There is no up and there is no down. And what's interesting, this picture was taken in 1998 for STS-90, my first spaceflight in Eurolab, back in the mustache days. So, you know, you can go on Twitter and vote for Dave with the mustache or Dave without the mustache, whatever you like. But you look at this picture and it's a great photograph because you wonder where is up and where is down. Something as fundamental as that we accept every day on Earth. So of course, down on Earth is really easy. Gravity has a vector. Gravity forces everything on Earth to go towards the center of the Earth. So we all sit in chairs. We feel the force of gravity. That orients us. We know intellectually that's the ceiling, this is the floor, these are the walls. Well, in space, up is where your head is. So for the people who are upside down relative to all of us, which includes myself, I would look at that image and say, you know what? That's the floor, this is the ceiling, and all you guys are kind of weird because you're sitting on the ceiling. And I know for all of you terrestrial folks, that's kind of a weird thing to think about, but having been in space twice, I'm actually totally comfortable thinking this is the ceiling, and that's the floor, and I can push off and I can go up to the floor up there. So it's really interesting living and working in this environment. And people ask questions like, don't you get sick if you're eating and you're upside down relative to somebody you're eating with? And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. One of the joys of being in space, those wrinkles just go away, right? That's why I want to go back to space. I won't have any wrinkles anymore. But we call this the moon face bird leg syndrome, or the puffy face bird leg syndrome. And your face doesn't really get that puffy. You can imagine the little ones, right? The kids in grade 2 and 3, they love this picture. It's so cool. Anyway, you go to space, you look like that. And what ends up happening is that our body is made up of a lot of things, but it includes water. And of course, water kind of moves around depending upon the force of gravity. You've all experienced getting on an airplane, you take your shoes off, you're relaxing, you're going to fly to London, England, or even better, going to Paris to go shopping. It's a great place, by the way, before Christmas. And you get over there, and it's in the morning, and you know you're really tired because you've been on the airplane all night. You try and put your shoes back on, they don't fit. Why don't they fit? Because all the fluid shifted to your lower extremities by virtue of the effect of gravity. In the absence of gravity, the fluid that's in your legs shifts up into your chest and your face. You get this really puffy face and really, really thin bird legs. And this is an illustration from the book, but it shows that moon face and those little thin bird legs and things. And it's really quite remarkable. This is not my biceps, that's my thigh in space. And you look at that, and you know, if you, well, I'm wearing pants right now, but anyway, if you measured it right now today, it's actually a couple of inches bigger than it is there, just by virtue of the shift in volume that takes place in our body. So it's great, kids can help understand that your body's in fact made up of different things, but your body includes a lot of water, and making sure that we're drinking every day appropriately helps us maintain that volume in our body. So of course there is no up, there is no down. You can do all sorts of things. You can play around, orient yourself in any different environment you want. Interestingly enough, you'll probably wonder, you see these signs on the walls? Oh, there we go, there's a sign right there. So how is that written? Well, it's written in the typical 1G orientation. So it's written such that that's the floor, and this writing is oriented so that you have to put your feet towards the floor to be able to read it. But you actually get very good at reading things while you're upside down when you're in space. But it's an interesting dilemma. And you can, of course, pretend you're Superman, and you can push off from the wall, and this is taken in the FGB, the Russian segment of the International Space Station. You push off at one end, and you go right to the other end. It's really incredible if you do it gracefully. If you're not so graceful, sometimes what happens, you bounce into the wall, or you know, your head hits the rack and things. As a physician in space, I've actually had a chance to, you know, take care of a few little inadvertent lumps and bumps and bruises that my colleagues got when they were floating around and bouncing off things. And there are no shoes in space. So this is really neat. Kids love this, right? There are absolutely no shoes. Why do you need shoes in space? The only time you need shoes in space is to be on the treadmill, to run, or when you're on the cyclodometer. But other than that, there's no shoes. We use socks and foot loops. So if you want to stay in one place, you just stick your toe underneath the foot loop, and that stops you from floating away. After you've been in space for a few months, you don't even need foot loops. You're so graceful. You're like the elf dancing across. You know, it's unbelievable. But people just freely float, and they do all sorts of things. So we have foot loops available. You don't really need them. This is a great picture of working without a foot loop. You know, imagine you're sitting just typing away, floating around, typing away. And the really experienced astronauts, the computer's no longer restrained. The computer's just kind of floating beside them, and they're just kind of floating, and they're just kind of typing, and the computer's kind of doing its thing. And it's really quite amazing being able to do that. But understanding how to really work in this environment is something that kids just love, and is very exciting for them. So, you know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, what do you eat when you're out in space? Well, we have a pantry. And, you know, just like when you're in university and you have roommates, you don't want to swipe your roommate's food, right? That's really bad. You know, they go out and they buy that super Haagen-Dazs ice cream, put it in the freezer, and you come back from university and you want to go in there and you say, Haagen-Dazs, oh, no, that's my roommate's, I shouldn't eat it. Well, in space, they have color codes. You see these little color codes, these dots on things? So there's an orange dot there, an orange dot there. My crew color was orange. So what you're supposed to do is you pick your food ahead of time, and then when you're in space, you eat what you picked, which sounds very, very logical. I don't understand how the color of a dot on an M&M container or the brownies spontaneously changes from red to orange or from orange to blue. Maybe we should do a scientific experiment on that. But of course, what's happening is people are going in and they're switching the dots, right? You want some extra brownie? Nobody's looking, you know. But anyway, so this is a typical meal in space, and over here we have potatoes over a tin. That's freeze-dried. So these are freeze-dried foods. These are radiated foods and things, so you can store them and it's not going to be a problem. These are essentially like camping foods. When I'm talking to kids, I just refer to them as camping foods, and they kind of get it. And in the center, this is peach ambrosia, one of our desserts. Shrimp cocktails over here. And this, does anybody want to eat this? If I rehydrated, any volunteers? Probably not, eh? That's spinach au gratin. Now, I actually enjoy spinach. If you ever have a chance to go to space, trust me, do not, under any circumstances, eat the spinach au gratin. You've been warned, and if you do it, it's at your own risk. Having said that, it's kind of cool. Up here is tea with lemon, and you add water to it, shake it up. It's essentially crystals, and you rehydrate it. It's not a big deal. The shrimp cocktail in the space shuttle program was the most popular food choice of astronauts. And true story, I'm not going to name the name. I know of one particular astronaut who went to space and had shrimp cocktail for breakfast, for lunch. What would you like for dinner? Oh, shrimp cocktail, of course. Every day for the whole space flight. It was quite mind-boggling, actually. But the reason why people like the shrimp cocktail, shrimps are kind of cool, but it has horseradish. And when you go to space, the volume that shifts up into your face, it gives you this moon face and things, makes it feel like you have a cold. And when your nose gets stuffy, what happens when you have a cold? Food doesn't taste really, really good. So for the first few days you're in space, you like to have things that are really spicy, and we add pepper and things, you put salt on. Do you guys know how we put salt on in space? You take the shaker and you shake and it just goes everywhere. What's going to happen? So what we do is we take salt and you dissolve it in water, and you just squeeze it on, and the surface tension, it gets on your food. The same thing. It's like liquid pepper. It's pepper suspended in oil, and you put it on, and it spreads on the food, and you taste this. Kids love it. You can play with your food. You know, the food has Velcro on it. So these little blue things are Velcro. You can Velcro it to the wall. And of course, NASA is a government organization. We want to make sure that everything is proper. So they give you a meal tray, kind of like the airlines, you know. Except nothing's going to stay on your meal tray because there's no gravity to hold it on the meal tray. There's little squares of Velcro, but nobody ever really uses the meal trays in space, right? We like to have our food kind of floating, hanging out. You Velcro it to your leg, you Velcro it to the wall, whatever you want to be able to do. And of course, you can have freely floating tacos. So imagine the Frisbee games you get into in space with your taco, right? It's amazing. Okay, so check this out. The person in the back, I'm going for it. You flip them the taco and it just goes perfectly. Absolutely amazing. But of course, you've got this sitting here. And by the way, we were really impressed. This is Rick Mastracchio. I did my first and second spacewalk with Rick. We were really impressed with this photo because it also has this alien object floating in the mirror over. We thought that was really cool. Come on, this is like the astronaut photographic art. Okay, so huevos rancheros, breakfast eggs. You know, you just take your taco and you stick it on the wall with a little clip and you hold it there. And the eggs, you know, you just whip them on top of the taco and they stick there. Why? Because of the force of surface tension. So it allows us to talk to kids about surface tension and what surface tension is all about, why things stick together. And of course, you've got a lot of hot sauce when you're in space because you want things to taste good. But that's how we make our breakfast tacos, and it's really kind of an interesting environment. So of course, taste, which is something that, you know, we teach to kids, and we teach it all the way through elementary school, high school, and into university. And as we teach more and more, as one gets more advanced, we're learning more about the different sensory systems. But the sense of taste does change. And it's a great opportunity to talk about taste and the portion of our body that's associated with taste. So the taste receptors are actually on the tongue, but in fact you need that olfactory sense as well to give you the full aroma of the food that you're eating. So it's kind of fun to be able to do this. It's even better, you know, squirting your hot sauce onto the food, whatever it is you're eating. We love the illustrations. Theo, our illustrator, is from South Africa. I actually haven't met him yet, but he did an amazing job in putting these illustrations together for the book. And of course, fruits and vegetables in space on a short duration space flight, it's really easy. But on a long duration space flight, needless to say, you don't want to, or you're not able to have any fruits and vegetables until a Soyuz resupply vessel comes and brings up fresh fruit and vegetables. But you can imagine the cravings that you get into, right, where you're really craving having something fresh and things. So one of the things we're doing on board the International Space Station is trying to grow things to see ultimately will we be able to grow things in space. All of you have probably seen the photograph of Scott Kelly growing a flower in space, which is really cool. Peanut butter, an interesting challenge of viscous forces and viscoelasticity, but you stick the knife into the peanut butter, you pull out what you think is going to be a little bit, and the whole jar of peanut butter kind of comes out. That's Mike Bernhardt on the right-hand side of the slide. I guess he was waiting for his peanut butter sandwich before he went to do a spacewalk. But it's kind of cool for kids to think about this. We do play basketball in space. I'm not allowed telling you these are M&Ms. Oh no, I told you. Oh my goodness gracious, what am I going to do? Anyway, we have what are called sugar-coated candies in space because we're not allowed to do any product endorsements. These are M&Ms, and you know, if you're from Canada, you can bring your Smarties with you. It's all good. But if you want to play basketball, you play it with M&Ms. So you get somebody, you know, they can be 15, 20 feet away. Open your mouth, and you go for the three-point shot, right? You kind of line it up, and you push the M&M in their direction, and the M&M goes in a perfectly straight line. And if you're lucky, it goes in their mouth, and this is success, and it might bounce off their nose, might hit them in the eye, get a corneal abrasion, call the doctor, it's all good, no big deal. But anyway, it's fun for kids to be able to think about what you can actually do with your food. Water in space is governed by the principles of the forces of surface tension. So when you squeeze out a blob of water, it forms a perfect sphere. And it'll freely float in space. This is a picture of Leland Melvin. And you can't really see Leland behind us because he's out of focus, but you can definitely see him in this sphere of water. And this is going to the drinking bag that we talked about earlier on. So on Neurolab, my first space flight, it was understanding how the nervous system adapted to being in space. We had over 2,000 living organisms with us, and we had what's called a thought experiment. So this would be so cool to do. I've talked to kids about this all the time. So you release a big blob of water, big blob like this, and it's kind of floating around, doing what water does. And imagine this. You take a goldfish, and you stick it in the blob of water that's just kind of floating around. Is this goldfish going to know that there's no glass aquarium there? Is it going to like swim through the air-water interface and get out there in the air and be flopping around? Who stole the water? What happened? Or will it get its nose right to that edge? And because of the surface tension force, the force of surface tension, will it kind of feel like a little resistance go, oh, that's bad out there, I'm going to swim back this way because there's no problem. And of course, in the absence of gravity, and I know this for a fact because we had fish with us, a Neurolab, the fish swim in whatever direction they want. It's the most bizarre thing to watch. You look in the aquaria, and the fish are swimming like this, and then they swim straight up, and they swim straight down, they're swimming around in circles. It's really quite cool. I'm sure the fish would really enjoy this. And nobody's ever done that experiment, but it's a great thing to ask kids and get them thinking about what it's like to be in space. Of course, blobs of water, the problem if they escape, NASA doesn't like us releasing blobs of water. They float around. Imagine that you got your MacBook Pro there, right? And a blob of water just gloms on your keyboard. Probably not a good thing. So, you know, if you release any water into the cabin of any spacecraft, you have to clean it up, which means you either have to drink it, or you take a towel and you kind of sweep it through the air like a matador, and you capture the water that kind of things. So there I am with the blob of iced tea. When we take photographs of this, we always like to have small little blobs, right? You really don't want to get the photo of you with this honking great big blob of water like this. No, that wasn't me. It was Rick did that. Yeah. Anyway, there I am with my blob of iced tea. And if you look really carefully, you'll see that there's little bubbles in the center of this. So this is kind of neat because you can talk to kids about what it's like having a centrifuge that spins things around. And of course, when we're talking about going to Mars and creating artificial gravity, we have what's called a human-powered centrifuge, which is a bike that goes around a circular track. Your head's in the center, so you have no gravity, but your feet and your lower extremities, you're feeling the centripetal force of cycling around a circular track. So I got all these air bubbles to line up in the center of this iced tea by spinning the iced tea. And how do you spin a sphere of iced tea? Now that's a really cool question to ask kids. If you have a blob of iced tea floating in space, how do you spin it? Well, you can blow on it, right? So you start blowing like this, and the friction, when the air hits the sphere of iced tea, it'll start with the friction of the air hitting the side of the fluid, it'll start it to spin. And the faster you get it to spin, the more the air bubbles will go to the center, just like a real centrifuge. It's really, really cool. And things. Or, what you can do, if you don't want to blow on it, you can take some dental floss and just flick it, and it starts to spin, and that's kind of neat as well. Interestingly enough, you can actually eat your liquid. You don't have to drink liquid in space, you can eat it with chopsticks. So, you know, you got your sphere of iced tea, and you take your chopsticks and you kind of come over, and by virtue of surface tension, as you approach the blob of iced tea, it'll grab onto the chopsticks because of surface tension, then you stick it in your mouth, and you can eat your iced tea instead of drinking it, which is kind of fun as well. And these are all kind of thought experiments that instead of just telling our young readers right away, we can ask the question, so what happens if you got this blob of water coming over and you were to approach it with chopsticks? And then they'll answer the question. Then we can kind of go through how it's possible to eat things with chopsticks when you're in space. Now, on Earth, all of you have had lunch. Was it a good lunch today? Yeah? You guys, it was Friday. You must be tired or something. Everything's like really quiet. Anyway, we had a good lunch today? Yes, it was good. All right. So on Earth, in a gravitational environment, the air that you swallow when you eat, because whenever we're eating, we always swallow a little bit of air with the food we're eating, Or you may have had a Diet Coke or some other soft drink or whatever. So air gets into your stomach. But on Earth, it's kind of like this diagram on the left-hand side. You have an air fluid level, right? Because there's gravity. So all the stuff in your stomach kind of goes to the bottom of the stomach and the air goes to the top. And if I showed you an X-ray of somebody in the emergency department, where I used to work all the time, you would see what we call an air fluid level. Well, that's really, really cool. But when you go to space without gravity, what happens? There's no longer an air fluid level. So the air is just kind of randomly mixed up in all the other stuff that's in your stomach. So the challenge then becomes, what happens when you burp? And the answer is, good luck with that, because it's kind of random. You could have air come up, or you could burp, and you know what, your strawberry milkshake might come up, or your iced tea, or like who knows. And the thing is, when you're in space and you burp, it's not like you're barfing, right? You know, when you actually throw up, it's pretty hard to stop that from taking place. But when you burp, you feel this stuff coming up and you go, oh. So what is the appropriate space etiquette to do? You swallow. You know, it's all good, right? It was in the lower digestive system, comes up a little bit, you just put it back to where it came from. Not a real problem, I think. So that's why we came up with the title of the book. To burp or not to burp, burp at your own risk, because you have no idea what's actually going to happen when you burp in space. So, needless to say, kids love this because it's all about, you know, all those weird, wonderful things that happen to our body. So the 2 times that we wear shoes in space, or when you're running on the treadmill, or where you're cycling on the cyclergometer, we do have a rowing machine and a resistive exercise device. So the bottom line is we wear shoes to exercise. The rest of the time we're not wearing shoes at all. This is Sergei Krikalev. He's running on the space station treadmill, which you can see is really, really narrow. And it's kind of neat because you have a shoulder harness to hold you on the treadmill. And you have to learn how to run on this treadmill, because we all know how to run on Earth. You just run, no big deal. But when you got this shoulder harness with elastic bungees kind of pulling you down, you're kind of going up and down and up and down. And it's really a weird sensation. Sunny Williams, no relation at all, but Sunny's one of the American astronauts. She actually ran the Boston Marathon on the space station treadmill while she was in space, and the Boston Marathon was going on Earth. We can do this. It's kind of a neat thing to be able to do, but it's fun. So we do have cycling shoes when we're in space, right there. And this is Dan Burbank riding on the cyclotometer on the space station treadmill. You know this guy Lance Armstrong? Anybody heard of him? Yeah, we all heard of Lance, right? He's supposed to be really fast and all this. It's really amazing. I can look him straight in the eye and say, I cycled all the way around the world in 90 minutes. Right? Kind of neat to be able to do that. When you share that with kids, they first look at you like, wait a minute, like, how did you do that again? And they say, well, the space station orbits the Earth every 90 minutes, so I'm inside the space station on my bike and I'm riding. And it's really kind of mind-boggling when you start thinking about what we're able to do in space. And of course, when you're exercising in space, you know, there is no up, there is no down. So, you know, there's a picture of him on the space station treadmill, and of course, he, in his own world, is right side up. So this other astronaut is, would be perceived as being upside down. And it is kind of interesting that in space, when you first get there, sometimes people get a left-right confusion, because when you're upside down and inverted, you sort of wonder, like, okay, which is left again? And then you have to sort of go, well, no matter what, this is still my left hand, and this is still my right hand, so if this is my left hand, that way must be left, and this way must be right. But when astronauts go to the airlock, and we'll talk about that in a second, it's a bit of a confusing thing for them. Exercising in space also includes resistive exercise. So this is a great question you ask kids. So how do you lift weights in space? Well, of course you can't lift weights in space because they're not going to weigh anything in space. I can move around a gyroscope that weighs 650 kilos in 2 hands when I'm in space doing a spacewalk. So what we do is we have essentially resistive exercise. It's like bungees or elastic bands that attach to the side of this bar. And this is called the RED, the resistive exercise device. And things, and I think it costs like 25 or 30 million. If you watch the Home Shoppers Network on Friday night, you see the TheraFlex, the Bowflex devices, and then you buy them for $900. NASA should have bought a Bowflex for $900 and put them on, save themselves, about $20 million doing it. But anyway, this is very cool, and you can do resistive exercise to maintain your bone strength and your muscle density, because bones are living tissues, and many people think of bones as something that's dead. In fact, that's not true at all. Once we die, our skeleton, cells and is reabsorbed by something called osteoclasts, which break the bone down. That's these guys that are chewing away at it. And in space, there's an imbalance between the osteoclast activity such that bone reabsorption takes place over a period of time. So when I go to space, I lose bone density at a rate of 1 to 2% per month, which is kind of an interesting thing. But then the question becomes, so what happens if I go to Mars and it takes me 6 months to get there? Well, most people are going to lose 10 to 12% of their bone mass. And when you start to lose 10 to 12% of your bone mass, you're at risk of getting a spontaneous fracture, right? So, you know, if you fall over on Mars and it's been 6 months of zero-G getting there, you might actually break your ankle or something like that. So we have countermeasures to prevent this. But for kids, for young readers, the important point is that bones are dynamic, that they're growing. And, you know, as kids grow, they understand that they're building bone, and in space we're reabsorbing bone a little bit. But the great thought experiment to ask a kid is, okay, so let's say you go past Mars, right? You're going way out there into deep space, and you're losing bone density at 2% per month. Let's say you're out there for 50 months. Does this mean you turn into a jellyfish? Like there's no more bones? And it turns out that it's non-linear. Right? It's not like a progressive linear loss of 2% every month. And we know that intuitively because we know on Earth that if you very tragically are in an accident situation, you're in a wheelchair for whatever reason, people who are in wheelchairs, they still have bones in their legs. They don't reabsorb the bones that are in their legs and things. But it's an interesting scientific question. So we ask, you know, as we're going farther beyond into deep space, do we need artificial gravity? And the short answer to that is probably yes. How do you get artificial gravity? You could spin the space station. You could spin the spacecraft that you're in and things. Sleeping in space, very cool. We have what's called the sleep restraint system. It's essentially like a sleeping bag. Of course, we can't call it that. And I did have interesting dreams in space. Once you've been in space, you will have Earth dreams and space dreams. And you can have space dreams when you're on Earth after you come back, or you can have Earth dreams when you're in space. But I was sitting there sleeping away in space one time, minding my own business, as they say, and all of a sudden I woke up because I thought there were these hands reaching out to strangle me. And I woke up and there were these hands floating in front of me. I went, oh my God, what's going on? Then I realized they're my own hands. Because in space, the body assumes the position where the muscle tension is just relaxed, and your hands will float up in front of you like this, your knees will bend, your hips will bend a little bit, and in fact, if you want to nap in space, it's really cool. You just close your eyes, and you kind of float around, you're like this, and you bounce off the wall, and it's really a very relaxing thing to be able to do. Your crewmates look at you like, oh, what's going on with Dave? His body kind of floats by. Just taking a little nap, it's all good. Having fun being able to do it. Oh my goodness gracious. Who put that in there, Laura Don? Did you put that in there? Oh my goodness gracious. The most commonly asked question about human spaceflight, and what I love doing, is if I give a talk to kids and adults, invariably when we ask for questions, some guy in the back, you can see leaning over and whispering into the ear of his son or daughter, and then the hand comes up, you know, the kid asks the question, how do you go to the bathroom in space? And you know it was really the dad that was asking. Right? So for all of you that are curious about how do you go to the bathroom in space, my answer is very carefully. All right? Because of course on Earth, with terrestrial toilets, you have gravity that helps things to move away from you. And that's the most important thing when you go to the bathroom. You want things to move away from you, right? Away from you is all good. You don't want things to come the other direction towards you. That's not so good. So anyway, when you're in space, the space toilet, you can actually sit on it, and then there's a little funnel for the guys and stuff. But anyway, and the girls get to use the funnel as well. They just have a little different device on the top. But the bottom line is we use suction to make things move away from you. So it's airflow. So, you know, you're sitting there on the loo, and it's all kind of cool. But literally, do you like that? Pun intended. The airflow, you know, it's very refreshing. You sit on the toilet when you're in space. But with the funnel, the most important thing with the funnel is make sure you grab your own, right? Oh my goodness, that's gross. It's like everything else in space, you know? You don't want to grab somebody else's washcloth or anything. So you grab your own funnel, it's very good. And then, you know, you kind of plug it in. If you are experienced, you could be a free floater and kind of float around while you're going. It's not a big deal. As long as your aim is good, right? Guys, pay attention. Aim has to be good. Okay, so you got to aim properly. You can kind of float around. Most of us, though, will use the foot restraints and kind of hang out the foot restraint while you're doing this. not a big deal. And of course, if you're doing something that produces solid waste, and as teachers, you know, the kids are going to ask you, well, what about the P words? Kids love P words, right? It's really cool. Being poopy, oh, it's amazing. We've all had kids, so we know what that was like as parents growing up and stuff. Well, in the space program, we don't use that terminology, of course, because we're astronauts. So it has to sound really cool. So we talk about liquid waste and solid waste. It's much more socially acceptable, right? So if you are producing solid waste, you have to assume a position. And getting into the position takes incredible amounts of training because the opening is in fact very narrow. And right, you want things to go away from you, so if you're not aligned with the opening, you can imagine what happens. But anyway, you've got foot restraints, you kind of sit down there, it's really cool, you gotta make sure your toilet paper is close by, and then you get to go. With the assumption that you're not constipated. Because in the absence of spending a lot of time exercising and moving around, it turns out that it takes longer for food to go through your digestive system, and there's a greater risk of astronauts becoming constipated in space, because you can't actually get dehydrated, particularly if you're throwing up. So, you know, somebody's sitting there waiting for you. Are you done yet? No, I'm still going. And this can actually be a real problem. Again, it's just like university when you have roommates. You know, there's always somebody that goes in there first thing in the morning, takes a 30-minute shower, uses all the hot water. Oh, my goodness, who put this up? Kids will ask the most interesting questions, you know. Do we pass gas in space? Well, yes, we do, and everybody passes gas because, of course, you're swallowing air, and we know all about that. So, you know, you produce gas when you're in space. But they want to know, is it propulsive? Do you generate enough, you know, so that, you know, Newtonian physics, to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you let one go, are you going to go again? No. The answer is no. And the reason is that if you think about the body mass, okay, your total mass of your body in space, you know, just like a little toot, you're not going to go anywhere. But it's a great question to think about. You know, very curious minds must know these sorts of things. And of course, if you're in a spacesuit and you let one go, that's not a big deal because you're the only person in the spacesuit. But in fact, if you're in a group environment in space, you can't blame it on the cat or the dog, right? It's not going to work. Everybody's looking around, okay, who did that? Fess up and things. This is kind of interesting because, of course, once you go, you have to clean up, and you don't want to leave the toilet, or we call it the WCS, the waste containment system. You don't want to leave it contaminated. You do produce a lot of solid waste when you're in space. And of course what we do is we put it in canisters. So those canisters are actually in the WCS itself, and the solid waste gets put in there. We just take them out, store them, and then they come back and they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere on one of the Progress vehicles that burns up in the Earth's atmosphere. So ultimately, all the solid waste gets burned up. But it's a great question because we've all seen The Martian. So if you're stranded on Mars and you want to figure out what to do with your solid waste, you can grow potatoes with it. That's always kind of neat to be able to do. Don't want to break the toilet because if you break it, everybody else can't use the toilet anymore. So you have to resort to what's called Apollo bags, which is kind of a Ziploc bag that's sticky. And I'll leave it to your imagination as to where you stick that bag to make it work. But needless to say, nobody wants to do that. Shaving in space, kind of cool. We've got electric razors, we've got straight razors and shaving cream. Toothpaste, it's really interesting. NASA didn't train me how to brush my teeth in space. So I get to space and I don't know what to do. So I squeeze the toothpaste, I'm brushing like this, and I'm ready to spit, but there's no sink to spit in. So what you end up doing is you have to spit into a washcloth. And then ultimately that will be dirty laundry that gets brought back or burnt up. But of course, if you really squeeze your toothpaste, it'll go everywhere. It's kind of floating around and stuff, so you don't want to do that. It'll freely float in the cabinet. And the question is, how often do you brush? Because you're orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, so if you brush every time there's a sunset and a sunrise, you're brushing all the time. But in fact, what we do is we have a 24-hour cycle in space, and we turn the lights on and off such that we're asleep roughly 8 hours. So you brush before you go to bed in your pre-sleep activities, and you brush when you wake up in your post-sleep activities, which is a lot of fun. Washing your face, so if you look carefully at this cosmonaut, you see a blob of water there and a blob of water there. It's really a neat way to wash your face, because you release this big blob of water, and you stick your face into it, and it just sticks on your face. It's kind of like the fish experiment again, right? So this is really cool. You open your eyes, and you're looking out through this blob of water, and then you realize, what am I going to do with the blob of water? So that's where you need the towel to be able to take care of all this. Showering in space, we actually don't have a shower in space. This is from Skylab. back in the 70s when the Americans did have a shower in space. And interestingly, once you bring the cylinder up, close it, you got a little spray gun, so you spray the water, bounces off your body, you get all these blobs of water floating around and things. And you soak yourself up, so you got suds and water all over your body. And then it's like when you're in this apartment and your shower in the bathroom fails. You ever had that? You know, you're all soaked up and then somebody turns the water off. I mean, it's really unbelievable. So how do you get rid of all this stuff that's all over your body? You have a handheld vacuum. It's really neat. You turn on and you suck all this stuff off and your hair gets stuck in the vacuum. That's a whole other story. But that's the way they used to do it. And on the space station, we don't do it that way anymore. Basically, what we have is rinseless shampoo. So, you know, it's liquid, but it's rinseless, so you don't actually have to wash it out. You towel it out. And then we do the equivalent of a sponge bath. We wet the washcloth and sponge ourselves down. And it's really quite relaxing because, you know, you can sort of float around, clean your armpits, you know, clean yourself and things. If you're on the exercise bike and you decide to exercise without your shirt on, your sweat actually forms a big blob on the back of your back. You get this lake of sweat. It's kind of gross. And then there's these astronauts who kind of shake like a dog, and their sweat goes, oh. I know, it's incredible. Kids love this one, you know, long underwear in space. All I can say is when I did my spacewalks, I didn't look like Sandra Bullock when I came in out of my spacesuit. Like this. And of course, you can have the ultimate bad hair day in space. There's no gravity to hold your hair down. There's a picture of Tracy on the mid-deck of the space shuttle NSTS-118. Getting her hair ready to put it in a bun or putting it in a hat or whatever. So, you know, if you have long hair, it's possible to have the ultimate bad hair day in space in the absence of gravity. And of course, cutting your hair, you wonder, like, what happens to the hair that's cut? Well, it's just going to float around unless you do something with it. So we have a vacuum, and we suck all the cut hair into this little vacuum to stop it from becoming airborne. And of course, when your friends are cutting your hair, who knows what they're going to do until you look in the mirror afterwards, right? You say, oh, look at this. Let me give you the racing strike look and things. Interestingly, in space, we don't have dust bunnies. Dust bunnies are created on Earth because of gravity. So dust bunnies, you know, we find that they're underneath the bed and they're all over. And it's a unique collection of dead skin and hair and all sorts of other stuff that just accumulates on Earth. Well, in space, we don't have dust bunnies because the stuff kind of floats around. And it gets trapped by the fans and things. But one of the other things that traps it is your nose. So, you know, in space, the phrase digital extraction is the way in which we get this stuff out of your nose, because you can't simply blow your nose. There's too much stuff in there. So you end up surreptitiously, you know, usually in the morning, kind of doing the old nose pick thing. But you do have to sometimes pick this stuff out of your nose because there's so much of it. And interestingly, one of the problems of picking your nose is you get a nosebleed. You don't want to do that in space. So, you know, we have to be thoughtful when we're doing this, otherwise it could be a problem. When you're in space, you get taller. And you don't actually grow. It's just the space between the vertebrae, those bones in your back, widens. So there's vertebrae, and then there's these little discs between your vertebrae, the bones in your back, and the discs are like little cushions and things. Well, that disc space spreads out. So on Earth, on a good day on Earth, if I'm really feeling pumped up and things, I'm 6'1". In space, I was 6'2 3/4". That was amazing. I could have played pro basketball in space, you know. I come back to Earth, and as soon as I stood up, I went back to being 6'1" again. But it's kind of neat being in that environment. And when you're in space, it's not like your legs change length at all, so your pants still fit. It's your torso gets longer because your whole vertebrae spreads out a little bit. So your shirts, you know, your t-shirts and things, you get this really cool kind of midriff thing. That's why you got to go to the gym before the space flight, get those ripped abs, you know, when you're up there, and all your crewmates are lifting at your belly button. It is possible to enjoy the time up there. So we have a guitar in space. This is a Larry Bay guitar that I'm playing. We do have a chance to relax. A great shot of Bob Thurston and Julie Payette playing on the space station. The only time that we've had two Canadians in space, so we thought we'd put that in the book because it was just really cool. You can fly books and bring books with you, and it's really interesting looking at the reading habits of international astronauts. You got one person reading Harry Potter, which is probably a great book to read in space, right? You could read the whole series over 6 months. You got somebody reading Wild Blue, which is an aviation book, and then a Russian cosmonaut is reading a fish atlas. I don't know, you know, to each their own. Maybe he's thinking about that experiment with a sphere of liquid floating around. Well, working on the space station was amazing. My last space flight, I had a chance to do 3 spacewalks going outside to help build the International Space Station, set the Canadian record. I've done 3, Chris did 2, and Steve McLean did 1. And all 3 of us are very proud of the fact that we were able to represent Canada and ride Canadarm. It's amazing. When you're outside doing a spacewalk, you feel those extreme temperature environments where it goes from being really hot when the sun comes up to really cold during a nighttime pass and things. It's quite incredible. Of course,